大家好，欢迎收看《天天话题》，我是雨琦。2022年3月，美国 TCL 中国剧院里，美国亚裔喜剧表演者们上演了一场精彩的脱口秀节目《Crazy Funny Asians》，疯狂搞笑的亚洲人，呼吁世界反对亚裔仇恨及犯罪。这场表演的组织者和发起人就是 Alvin 黄述飞。Alvin 黄他是建筑师、教育者，更是引领社会进程的推动人。今天我们演播厅里就邀请到 Alvin 做客节目。Alvin, welcome to the studio. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So the show was a blast. There were over 300 people in the audience, laughter and tears. But more importantly, the show brought awareness to the anti-Asian hate crime. So how did this idea come about for you?
Well, the idea came about when one of our members came to us at one of our events and told us that she was a comedian and that she organized a weekly stand-up show on Sunset every week, Cat C.
I'm a fan of the Comedy Store.
Yes, and so she does her weekly show at Sunset Grill, and we started talking about it, and we realized it would be a great opportunity to capitalize on what we've been doing. We've been doing a series of events called Crazy X Asians, which started off first as obviously kind of leveraging the success of Crazy Rich Asians as the book and the movie, but looking at the other blanks we could fill in terms of other than rich. And so we'd done a series called Crazy Creative Asians, which was about architects, artists, photographers, etc. Then we did one about Crazy Educated Asians, which was kind of focused on educational awareness. And then we also did one called Crazy Entrepreneurial Asians, which was focused on entrepreneurs and business endeavors.
Right.
And when this opportunity presented itself, we realized that this was a way to kind of extend the a momentum that we have right now as a Chinese American and Asian American community in terms of the popular success of our, the figures that we're starting to have now in mainstream media, whether it's comedy or others.
Yeah.
But also a way that we could address, some of the bigger issues that are facing our community right now.
Yeah.
Where, the irony is we have more mainstream visibility than ever in terms of our success as actors or writers or musicians or anything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're there's been a huge spike in anti-Asian attitude in not just this country but the world.
Yeah, and there was an incredible lineup. Tell us more about the lineup.
So the lineup was fantastic. We had a great lineup of comedians. Cat C, who is Chinese American. There's Derek Mio, who's Japanese American. PK, a Korean American. Stephen Ho, who is Vietnamese American. John Chen, who is Taiwanese American. And Tom Tran, who is also Vietnamese American.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And the comedians were all super fantastic, and I think what comedy really does is comedy is about people relating to people and telling jokes that people can connect with. And I think what it illustrates is that despite us all being from different backgrounds, is that we actually have more in common than we do different.
That's so true. I couldn't agree more. And I think what comedy does is that it uses the laughter to bring people together.
Absolutely.
In a very positive and meaningful way.
Absolutely. And I think in that instance, what we really hoped for and what we think we achieved is that not only is this moment about, kind of addressing the kind of, and fundraising, we partnered with Stand With Asians, a nonprofit organization that is, supporting Asian American communities across the country. But it was also about solidarity in terms of coming together as an Asian American community, not just as a Chinese American community or all of the different compartments that we might fit into. And that solidarity is something that's really important for us to get through this, is not only the solidarity amongst us as Asians, but also our solidarity with other people of color, the African American population, the Latin American population, all forms of BIPOC populations, as well as the mainstream American population. And I think that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most about the show, is that the audience was from every corner of all walks of life.
Love that.
We had people of every background in attendance and connecting and laughing.
Yeah. So as a producer and organizer of the show, during this production process, what would you say was the most challenging thing for you?
Actually, the most challenging thing was the timing, right? Because the entire thing came together so quickly in just under a month, and getting the ball rolling. But we had so many things that just kind of fell into our lap. Some of the comedians are people that we know and we could reach out to. Others Kat knew and she was able to reach out to. And then the other challenge is, like, so many things just happened to fall into place. We were able to connect with the owners of the TCL Chinese Theater, and they were very, very generous in terms of hosting us. They wanted to support the cause, and obviously as the Chinese theater, it was really apt that it was held there, and as a kind of legendary Hollywood venue, it was also a great kind of legitimacy to be in a venue like that.
Right. So the show was in March. Are you looking to do more shows? Next series, what can we expect?
So we're actually strategizing right now. I have a meeting tomorrow to meet with the team with Stand With Asians with my good friend Mark Young, and we're going to be trying to secure some, let's call them highlight performers. We're trying to get a real big headliner to kind of do the next version, which we're hoping for in May.
Can I request Ali Wong?
I'd like to request Ali Wong too, but as would my wife. Yeah, she's fantastic. But I think what we are hoping to get somebody of her stature. I don't know if we'll get someone of her stature, but I think what we want to do is do something for AAPI Heritage Month, which is the month of May, and kind of really put this onto a bigger stage. And part of it is about raising awareness for the like, let's say the anti-Asian hatred is not getting the sort of mainstream press. It's really being circulated more so through social media.
That's right.
And I think for much of the American population, if you don't know somebody Asian, you actually don't know that it's happening because you're not following those types of social media. And so a lot of it is about awareness, and it's also about raising funds. So Stand With Asians is a fantastic organization that we're collaborating with, and they are supporting many local nonprofits and Asian American community funds through their community fund, through the proceeds that we're raising.
That's awesome, and I'm definitely going to be there for your next show.
Great, fantastic. Happy to have you there.
You're a trailblazer in every sense, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. You used a 3D printer and galvanized your network to produce this pseudo N95 mask for the hospital workers. Yeah. And that was just incredible. And what was that process like for you?
That was actually more of a fight or flight mode.
Survival mode.
Yeah, like at that point, this was March 2020 when we thought it was the end of the world. And we were all locked into our homes. I teach at USC, where I'm the director of the graduate architecture program. I had just taken the role of the director of the graduate program at that time. So I literally took the role, well, a couple months before a pandemic hit. And once the pandemic hit, one of the things that we realized is that we couldn't just sit there and do nothing.
Right.
This is actually a movement that was not initiated by me. It was initiated by me here in Los Angeles, but it was initiated by some colleagues of mine on the East Coast, Jenny Sabin, Mitch McEwen, Eric Howler, all in East Coast, whether it's Boston or New York or New Jersey. But they're at Cornell, Princeton, and Harvard.
And it had so much traction that Mayor Eric Garcetti incorporated it into his LA Protects campaign.
Yep. So it was a complete snowball. I saw the posts from my colleagues on the East Coast, and they were sharing open source the files. I took the files, shared them with USC faculty and students, and then put out an open call saying, if you have a 3D printer, we can print these, we can deliver them. My wife works at USC Keck Medicine, and so by pure chance, she connected me with somebody at Keck that was doing something along those lines. And what started off as about 30 or 40 of us snowballed and became 330 volunteers.
Wow.
We're spread throughout Southern California. We were delivering, we had drop-off and pickup locations. We produced about 7,000 3D printed face masks, and about 11,000 face shields. We started collaborating with the city. We were delivering to USC Keck Medicine, Children's Hospital LA, Willowbrook Hospital in Watts, Children's Hospital LA. We delivered to a number of Native American reservations in Arizona and Colorado, and we had an amazing network of people supporting us.
Right. So with a production like this, it's not really about creativity, it's about saving lives. So, and it's a lot about the production process. What were some of the highlights during the project?
I think the biggest highlight was actually the culture that it created. Like at a time when we were totally detached from one another, and everybody was isolated working in their own home, we had this network of 330 people that were connecting every day on Zoom, on Slack, through Google Drive, sharing files, printing tips, tricks. There was people who volunteered that didn't have 3D printers, that were just runners, and they would pick up material, drop off material. We had sign-up sheets where people would say that, and collection bins where there were 7 collection bins distributed throughout the city. We had a West Side bin, a San Gabriel Valley bin, a downtown LA bin, a San Fernando Valley bin, an Orange County bin. And all of these people would collect from all of the people in their area, and then they would be the ones to drop off at the hospitals, because we were trying to minimize the contact between people. But it was a little bit like, I always joke and say it was like, this also kind of dates me, but it was like the movie Die Hard, where there's the entire time John McClane is running through this building trying to not get killed. He's on the walkie-talkie with this cop that he's never seen before. But the cop is giving him all the advice and telling him where to go and what to do. And at the end, they finally meet. And that was kind of like that whole Operation PPE thing. We're like connecting, emailing, Zooming, all these people I'd never met before, never seen before, never had any contact before. But we were a collective, and we had created this kind of, culture that was that everybody was brought together because of the moment. And that was a moment when doctors couldn't get face masks. Doctors were talking about using socks as masks.
Yeah, I remember. And it was unbelievable. And you're pushing the boundaries. You step forward and you started saving lives, saving the world in your own way.
We tried.
The mask, because of the size of it, a lot of people would think, oh, it's not that difficult to produce. But what I heard is every piece took at least a minimum of 3 hours to make.
Yeah. Well, it's 3 hours of print time, and then after it prints, there's some post-production work, and but yeah, about 3.5 hours.
Alvin, I'm a huge fan of your work.
Thank you.
One of my favorite design of yours is the shopping mall that you designed. the shopping mall in Bangkok. That one was amazing, very creative, but also futuristic at the same time. So I think your design speaks that balance, perfect balance of creativity and practicality. You were born and raised here in America. You're as a Chinese American. So how did your upbringing affect your philosophy as an architect?
Well, I think the first thing I would have to say is that my father was trained as an architect. He never practiced. So I was exposed to architecture at a relatively young age, and my father has a degree in architecture, but also a degree in urban planning and civil engineering. And though he didn't work as an architect, he appreciated architecture, trained as an architect, and also worked in construction and real estate development. And so I was exposed to a lot of these things at a relatively...
In the blood.
Yeah, in the blood, but also in the, let's say, exposure. And I got an opportunity to understand how construction works through my father and that exposure. I worked for him in the construction sites in the summers when I was in high school. But also I think one of the things that has emerged out of that is I happened to, graduate from my graduate studies in London in 2002.
Right.
Which happened to align with the kind of rise of China and Asia as a kind of global destination for architecture and design. And began working in offices in London where, by pure chance, I happened to be assigned to a lot of projects that took place in China and Thailand in particular. And that became the part of the world that I gained a lot of experience in. And I think one of the things that I've found and have consistently looked at as a big opportunity for myself is the fact that that was a time when, let's say, Asian world markets were really trying to import global talent to represent them on the world stage, whether that is through design or anything else. And they were looking for Western architects and looking for Western designs to kind of give them legitimacy. But at the same time, I could provide the Western expertise while providing the Eastern cultural understanding and even the Eastern, let's say, just social understanding. And so I could sit in a meeting and understand what might be perceived by some of the things that we do in the States that might be misunderstood in China or Thailand, where I've done work. And I think one of those things is also, let's say, an ability to understand some of the more innate nuances of Eastern cultural, let's say, tendencies or insights that might be overlooked or sometimes even, let's say, I think a lot of Western offices go into Eastern countries and tend to do a lot of, let's say, cultural appropriation or mimicry, where they'll do things that are maybe very direct kind of references to the culture, like I'll do a building that looks like a dragon, or I will do something, and it becomes very hokey or very cheesy. And I think what I've tried to do is really try to interpret Eastern, let's say, or Asian cultural understandings into, and I don't want to call them Western architecture because I don't believe it's Western architecture. I think it's about progressive contemporary architecture, which is universal and does not have a position as either being Western or Eastern.
I love that. And I love that philosophical approach to the design that you work on. And I think your background as a global citizen speaks to that as well. You have so many roles in your field. You are a professor at USC Architecture School. You have your own practice. You're educator in that sense, and you're also entrepreneur as the leader of your own company. And you're also an activist with all the projects that you do on the side. So how do you juggle between all these roles, and what do these mean for you?
I think you're forgetting the most important two roles, which is I'm a husband and a father, and that's the primary roles. But I would say that I live my life in a permanent state of guilt. So I tend to, whether it's my family or my projects or my office or my staff or my students or the kind of program at USC that I lead, there is always somebody that's not getting enough attention at any given moment. So I'm kind of moving between all of those things, and I can't say that it's easy, but I also have to say that they feed each other, right? Like they are, there's a ecology of how all of this works for me in terms of I see what I do not as, none of the things I do I think of as jobs. I think of all of them as lifestyles, and they kind of are who I am rather than what I do.
Growing up as Chinese American here in the US, how do you think the current climate of diversity has changed compared to your childhood? And what kind of changes do you wish, well, you have brought a lot of changes to the world already, but moving forward, what kind of changes do you wish to bring with your architectural work and also all your projects?
I mean, I think one of the things that has been very clear to me as a Chinese American is obviously the rise of visibility amongst the Asian American population here in this country, and our legitimacy, and perhaps our status as citizens rather than as guests or immigrants, right? I think there is, you know, a previous generation, maybe not even a previous generation, a very recent, you know, shift where we are part of mainstream American culture. And I don't mean just as naturalized citizens. I mean in terms of now you go to Trader Joe's and you can get xiaolongbao and you can get songyobing and you can get, you know, and
my favorites.
Yeah, but it's not just the Chinese people that are buying it.
Right.
Like it's.
And I feel so proud.
Yeah. And it's part of normal American culture, right? Like just like tacos are, or just like pizza is, like it is part of American culture. And I think that's a big, huge fundamental shift, right? Which is this, you know, America is a collection of cultures that has come here and made it our own. And I think one of the things for me that is beginning to shift within my own work is let's say, thinking about, you know, 2020 as a moment to reframe our priorities as a society or as a culture in terms of what is really important to us and how we can make what is important to us part of what we do, not just what we believe in, right? And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do at USC is really rethinking architecture not just as a professional service or a design discipline, but also as a expression or materialization of value systems, right? And so that buildings and the built environment around us is not just things that are professionally delivered or intellectually designed, but they are expressions of the value systems that we bring to the table, right? And those value systems are things that define who we are as people and what we do as a society.
Love that. Thank you for being such an inspiration, Alvin, to the world and especially to the Asian community here in the US. And
thanks for having me.
Come back anytime. We would love to have you again.
Thank you.
感谢您收看这一期的天天话题，我们下期节目再见。
您正在收看的是凤凰卫视。